Well, welcome. Thanks so much for coming. As you're getting in here, I'm hoping that you can see the screen. If you can't for any reason, let us know in the chat. We'll share the slide deck with you. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining. I know that particularly today with MFPE going on, that you had other options. So I really appreciate you taking the time to be here today. We are going to focus in on the math practices. So if this is your first time joining us, we're on session 3 of the series. Session 1 and 2 are both recorded and you can access those. We'll show you where in just a moment. But today's focus is really honing in on the transition from where we started, which was big picture, what has shifted. Then we went into talk about the content standards themselves, and now we're working on the other side of our standards, which are the practice standards today. And I do have to apologize, I have a little bit of a cold, so I'm sure that that's nothing new for all the teachers on the call. You guys are so used to the sniffles and probably have had them already, but my throat's a little hoarse, so if I lose my voice, I'm sorry, but we'll get through it. But our objectives today are to really figure out the math practices, what has shifted in Montana, and why we changed them. Like, why are we shifting from Common Core, and what's the mindset behind that, and the reasons for that change. We'll talk a little bit about the purpose of the math practice standards as well. We'll analyze some of those and try to start to break them apart and understand, because these are K-12 practice standards, what does that look like at the different levels that we teach? And then we'll start to identify ways to make these actionable, and then how they kind of link with some of the durable skills that our school districts have in their graduate profiles, and what they expect for graduated students. So some things to get us started. We will be engaged. I'll have a breakout room. So we'll get together, we'll kind of do some collaborating. There's some instructional strategies towards kind of the middle of this that you'll get to peek at. So we'll hopefully send you off with some resources you can use as well. If you need any accommodations, if something is not accessible to you, let us know. You can either message me in the chat, my name is Katrina Ingeldrum, or you can message my colleague Eva Cox, who's supporting a lot of the technical side of this session today. As far as resources go, Eva's going to drop a whole bunch of things in the chat, but we have a lot of things in a lot of places. So I try to duplicate locations so that you don't have to go far to find what you're looking for. But we do have a Google Drive with all of the things for every single session within this series. We have a session Google Drive specific to this one. Within that, eventually you'll see the recording of this. Right now, what you'll notice are the slides are in there, and then there's a participant handout as well. And that participant handout is just for those of us who like to take notes and then reflect, especially if you're like me and you forget things, and then when you're ready to process it, you want to go back and look again. So that is there. The additional part of that participant handout is that it has every single link, resource that you could possibly need that we'll cover both in this session and in the other sessions. The last resource I'll share is the Math Revision website, which is where we just house all of the materials and guidance documents and all of the support things there. I also really value your feedback. One of the key takeaways that you all provided last time, someone mentioned that the breakout rooms were really great. They liked those. However, there was an opportunity to maybe get us started a little quicker. So we have incorporated that this time, and we really value when you guys give us those kinds of critiques. With professional development as a provider, I have some requirements. So if this is new to you, we'll just kind of breeze through this, but there's things I have to meet. So some of the things I ask you to do in order to help with that are to check in, which we'll do in just a moment. Keep your camera on if you can. If you cannot, just shoot us a message to let us know that you've got something going on that prevents you from that, and we'll consider those. And then participate in the chat if you can, reflect, make connections, talk to other people. I'll certainly call out some of the things that people put in the chat. And then at the very end, we need you to complete the evaluation survey. So those 4 things are how you get your PDU certificate that I know a lot of you are here for. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. So here's that check-in component. If you could please take a moment and in the chat, just let us know who's here. Put in your name, where you work, and please share your favorite instructional activity that you use in your classroom. That can be like a 3-act math, a carousel, error analysis, anything you like to do with your students. Hey, Sonia. Oh, I like those vertical surfaces also. Those are good. Ooh, Mary, what's estimation mystery? Rachel, think, pair, share, so simple, but so amazing. Like next level thinking when you do those. I love those. Partner talk. I like seeing all the discourse opportunities in the chat. And I'm seeing lots of puzzles too. Becky, that looks like a fun game. Wonderful. Yeah, if you can keep dropping those in, that's going to help us understand who's here. Ooh, Annie. I don't know what Talk About It Tuesday is, but that sounds fun. Okay, we're going to go into some of our slides. We're going to go ahead and get started. If you haven't checked in, keep doing that. Oh, Mary, that sounds really fun. I'm going to have to explore that a little more. Thanks for sharing. Here are some reminders. This is taken from our last slide. It's just in case you were wondering kind of what you could be doing with implementing your new math standards in your school. Here's kind of a review of some of the action steps some of you all are taking. And with that in mind, I'm curious, since we had our last session, or maybe this is your first with us, what is this small step that you've started taking toward implementing the new standards? And if something's working well, or you're kind of running into a road bump, we want to know that too. So if you could drop something in the chat that you've done, and if you want to point out something that's working really, really well or not so well, we'd love to see that too. And I don't know if Ashley is here, but Ashley, if you want to come off of mute, if you are, and share one of the things you've been doing. We had a little meeting and Ashley shared some really cool things that I'd like her to be able to share with everybody else. Oh, there you are.
There I am. I was going to say, that's a lot to type for me.
You just share it orally. That's fine.
Yeah. So I've made documents where I've taken, I do 6th and 7th, but I started with my 6th grade standards, and I started with just really, because when we first talked, it was like verbs and nouns and then context. And so I really just, like we talked, like I overdid it and took all the verbs and all the nouns, and some of them are short and sweet, so it's totally fine. But then actually looking at each standard and doing that, okay, what is the actual skill they need to do? Put that into a box. And even we highlighted that highlighting that we did at the end of, or towards the middle of the meeting, was really great, because it really makes you think about, okay, the skill is more of the verb, yes, but, and then like, what is the big part of that standard? And it's been nice to break them down to see, and even those bigger standards where it's each individual, it's good seeing them all grouped together. And I told Katrina I did cheat, and I did put some in AI and got the I cans, but it's nice to be able to see the I cans next to the teacher breakdown part of it. So it's been super eye-opening. And yes, it does align still with what we're teaching and my content and my curriculum that I've been teaching. So it's nice to see that all together.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. And I'm
Yeah.
noticing some other questions as well in the chat. Um, I noticed some other pressure points like having time that is really challenging. And I hope admin is being supportive of that. Ashley, do you have any suggestions for how that's worked out for you? How you've made some
Yeah.
time for it?
Timing's hard for everybody, mom of two and a teacher. So I get it. A lot of mine have been, I teach two study halls. So I like try and get the kids working and then take a little bit of time. But I've also, like every other school district, we are so low on subs that when I go sub for a room, I'll bring my computer and work on it because it's usually you make sub plans and it's something that kids do on the computer or they're more self sufficient, especially because I usually sub for high school. That's usually when I find my time. I'm like hopefully anybody other veteran teacher. I don't work outside of work, so try and find that time in work that I can. Maybe 20 minutes during my prep, do one standard, and then just break it down. Don't think you're going to sit down and do all of them in one time period unless you have that time. Like these 2 days would be great, but definitely a very slow. No, it's not having to be done by next Friday type deal.
Thanks for sharing, Ashley. Hope that's helpful to hear from someone in the thick of it and actually doing the work with you all. Um, we're going to kind of move into understanding and framing our minds around what the math practices are and where they kind of came from and how we've gotten to where we are today. So I want to start by refreshing our understanding that the math standards for Montana are the required content standards for the state. So this is what the state expects all students to know and be able to do. I do know someone put in the chat, and then I've heard of from many other educators that some curriculum consortiums have their own standards. The state standards are the standards, period. So Amy Konzen, you can direct your further questions of that to her. I know she's working with some curriculum consortiums on that, but the state sets the requirements. Within those, there are content standards, which are the what of student knowing or learning. And then you have the practice standards, which are sometimes also called the process standards. And those are kind of the how. So these two things have to be merged. And we talked about this a little bit last time too, that I used the analogy that content standards are like the packages of information we want to deliver to students. And then the process or practice standards are the method of delivery. So whether we're teaching students to solve two-steps equations with collaboration or representation, cultural connection, these are the choices we're making to teach them how to engage in this practice, right? Or in this content. And when we don't have that kind of connectivity between the two, what ends up happening is we're leaving those packages at our front doorstep, which is when we're standing in front of students and teaching, right? So we need to engage them with those processes. NCTM and the National Research Council as well have something to say about this. They talk about 5 interrelated strands that create mathematical proficiency. And if you think about, if you're an elementary teacher, you might be familiar with like Scarborough's rope with reading, right? And reading proficiency. We have a similar kind of concept in mathematics as well. But we call them these 5 interrelated strands. They're conceptual understanding and procedural fluency, which really translate to those content standards. Then we have strategic competence and adaptive reasoning, which are typically our process or practice standards. And then the last really important component of this rope that we're building is the productive disposition. So these are the attitudes and perceptions that students have about their ability to learn. And within that is some productive beliefs. So these are beliefs recommended by NCTM that say in order for those 5 things to come together, that our instructors, our educators have to have some core productive beliefs. The first one of those is that teachers have to have the belief that math learning should focus on engaging those processes and the concepts together and giving students opportunities to solve, reason, and communicate. Another one is that students should have a range of strategies and approaches that they can use. NCTM also advises that students should be able to, teachers should believe that students can learn through exploring and contextual math problems rather than um, believing that they have to have some basic skills first before they get to explore. So that's just a recommendation from NCTM. They also believe that teachers have to hold the belief internally that the role of the teacher is to engage students in tasks that build those procedures and those processes. Thank you, Amy, for dropping that. The link that Amy just put in is the source for all of this information if you'd like to go check it out. It's a book by NCTM called Principles to Action. And another belief within that book is that the role of students is to engage in those processes when they're trying to learn mathematics. So using lots of strategies, using representations, justifying, making connections, and considering the reasoning. And you'll see a lot of these reflected in the math practice language that we use in Montana and in the Common Core as well. A couple of our last beliefs that are included in that text cover that effective teachers have to hold the belief that they provide students with appropriate, challenging, and productive struggle-based problems, and that they also provide a lot of encouragement and perseverance. So here are all those beliefs again. And my question for all of you is, which one of these beliefs is maybe the most challenging to actually put into practice? Not because you don't hold the belief, but maybe just something that has a barrier to it. Maybe your students just aren't at a behavior level where you can do something, or maybe they don't have a belief themselves, and so that makes it challenging. But if you could pick one of these productive beliefs that kind of cause friction sometimes for whatever reason, that would be great. And you can put it in the chat. I was talking and I wasn't even off mute. Sorry. I was saying, Mary, thanks for putting that in the chat. I agree. Getting students actively involved can be a challenge for a lot of reasons. Ashley, I totally agree. Sometimes kids just have a really hard time to focus. And I think we're noticing that more and more as time goes on. We're like, wow, these kids can focus less and less. It's like a goldfish memory at this point sometimes. Um, Having students be actively engaged. Yeah, Angela, that's so true. They just want to know, they want to be told what to do, and then they want to follow and regurgitate. Getting them that next step of like, what do you want to do can be hard. Yep. And the balance, Tammy, between procedures and memorization, hard. Thank you all for being so vulnerable and putting some of those in there. So why are we talking about those? Well, it's important to know what NCTM's recommendation is with kind of that framework understanding of where the processes should be and the beliefs we should hold about those processes so that we can put them into practice with these practice standards, right? So we're going to kind of pivot a little bit now that we have that foundational knowledge to understand why we're shifting. So why isn't the Common Core what we're using in Montana? Why did the task force make different choices? So they based this decision off of the Regional Education Laboratory. So that's that same organization that did all of the research for all of the content standards revision process and the practice standards revision process. You can, if you have the slide deck or the Google Drive, you can actually click this link and access that report yourself. It's handout B. It's also on the website. But some of their findings within that research were that routines, norms, and habits of mind are essential to learning and using math. That's not new. That's going back to that first slide we had where they showed that those 5 interwoven pieces that build conceptual understanding in math, right? So that's not new. But the new pieces that they included are that the NAEP standards are an evolution of our old practice and with the Common Core, and that students should be able to connect representations and engage in problem solving, super important. They also talked about how important discussion and discourse is in mathematics and how important the reflection process and monitoring of your process along the way is. So these are all things that in some way, shape, or form are typically represented in process standards as they've been kind of rewritten throughout the decades. And then the new part that showed a great opportunity that the task force really latched onto was that the research showed that process standards can actually increase an opportunity to integrate cultural relevant pedagogy, which in turn contributes to the emotional well-being of students, which is that kind of fifth strand that had talked about attitudes and perceptions, right? And we haven't really seen that explicitly stated in the processes before, but the task force tried to tackle it. And that's why you'll see one of our practice standards in just a moment. And this graphic is also within that handout from the REL. This graphic shows you kind of the progression. So Common Core was not the first iteration of these practice standards. It actually started way back in 2000 with NCTM making their own. And then the National Resource Council made their own in 2001. And then Common Core kind of combined those together to make theirs in 2010. And now we have the next iteration of that with the NAEP, and Montana took the NAEP and then adapted it, which we'll see here. These are all clickable. So right now you just have the headings in front of you. Each one of these, especially teachers who've been teaching for a while with the Common Core, know that this one, making sense of problems and persevering and solving them, has a whole paragraph of text that goes with it. But we're just going to look at the headings for the moment. I want you to think about, on the left-hand side, we have the NAEP math practices. In the middle, we have the Montana math practices, effective 2026. And then on the right-hand side, we have the Common Core ones. And I'm going to ask that you look for some connections. So just one connection that you see across the three frameworks, and maybe one thing that stands out. Yeah, a few of you right now are noticing that modeling is listed across the three. Andrea pointed out also that culturally connect. I'm interpreting her answer to say that that's one that's unique. Sonia's knowing abstracting and generalizing. Yeah, and justifying is there on all three. Great, Jesse. So there are some overlaps. Oh, Angela, nice graphic. Okay, so here are some connections that the task force made. So they were looking at these and said, okay, we're going to revise, but where are these kind of pieces going to connect and people are going to see the connections? So they really felt, based off of the research that the REL had, that problem solving and persevering was essential. So they kept that. That's still in our math practices from Montana. So rather than completely adopting NAEP, they kind of linked this previous math practice from Common Core over. They also chose to do abstract and generalize, which is a pretty close adoption from NAEP. If you go look at the language, you'll notice a lot of overlapping terms. And these are kind of a conglomeration of three math practices from Common Core conceptually. Justifying and proving, kind of the same thing as I just said with abstract and generalize. You had kind of a crosswalk that's pretty close there. And then a blending of constructing arguments and then attending to precision. This critiquing reasoning of others is woven in as well. Modeling with mathematics, most of you pointed out that, hey, that's pretty much equivalent as far as heading goes across. When you get into the nuances of language, I will point out that there are distinctions between these three frameworks. So if you're really into analyzing those distinctions, you may want to double check them. Representing kind of crosswalked well from NAEP to the Montana practices, and then is adaptation of this appropriate tools piece from Common Core. And then collaborative mathematics is new to NAEP. That, again, comes from that research that the REL pointed out, that having students collaborate and discuss and engage in collective mathematical thinking is really important. So that's why that is still in our math practices. And then the last one, which is unique to Montana, is that culturally connect math practice. We're the only state that has one of those. But the task force really felt like using that component of the research from the REL was important to give us opportunities to have our math instruction that we give to students be relevant to their culture and experiences. So that is new and unique to our state. So my next question for you all is, what's one math practice you love to engage in your classroom? What's your favorite one? I'm seeing modeling. Ashley, I like the comment, having students justify and prove, not just having AI do it. Representing, Tammy, so important for those littles when you're getting them from concept to the pictorial to the abstract. Super valuable. Seeing a lot of collaboration. Abigail, I agree. I like hearing students talk about math and getting excited. I love when they debate. My favorite thing is when they're fighting across the table with each other about math. And they're like, oh, I'm sorry for being so loud. And I'm like, nope, keep yelling. That's good. All right, what is one that you're excited to practice more in your classroom in the future? Having some justifying and proving, culturally connecting, more collaboration. Problem solve and persevere in all caps. Yep, getting that perseverance is tough. You figure out the magic solution to that, share. A lot of you are excited about cultural connection too. Jesse, yeah, modeling is really hard. If you're looking for resources for that, the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics has a series where they have K5, 6, 8, and 9, 12 PD on how to build modeling tasks for your classroom. So I would check that out for sure. We are going to transition. Now we understand why we shifted a little bit, where this is coming from, and how things have changed. We're going to move into the actionable piece. So we're going to get ready to do a breakout here in just a moment. We're not going to use the Padlet, so ignore that. Pretend it's not on the screen. But we have 3 breakout rooms for you. They're organized by grade band, and then each grade band will look at a specific task that's in that grade band. And you're going to be looking for some of those math practices at play. There's no really right or wrong answers here. I think you could probably debate all of these at some point. But K5 will look at a 3-act math task. 6, 8 will look at a Math for Love, which is Dan Finkel's work. And then 9-12, we'll look at an open middle. If you're really familiar with one of these and you want to pop into another breakout room, feel free. Like if 3-act math, you've done that, you've driven it into the ground, you want to check out what open middle is, you can definitely hop into that breakout room, but it will be a high school task, just FYI. So we'll open those up in just a moment and you can self-select which one you want to go into. I'm sure Amy's working on that in the background. When you get into your breakout room, you'll have a facilitator, and then you're just going to look at the task and analyze which math practices you see.
I'm getting ready to open those up. Katrina, how many minutes did you want? 7?
That sounds good, yeah. Oh, I'm muted. That's why you didn't give me the head nod. Sorry. Eva, can you give me the head nod if you can see the screen? Thank you. I was like, how come she didn't answer me? Welcome back, everybody. I hope that was helpful, and hopefully you walked away with something you want to explore a little bit more. If you're not familiar, we'll just walk through, because you guys didn't get to go into every single one of these, but the 3-act math tasks are essentially a way to get students in that exploration piece. So if you were one of those people that said, that's the push point, is getting kids to explore math and not be so restricted in their thinking, those 3-act math tasks really help with that. The Math for Love is Dan Fekel stuff. It's all really like play-based and exploration-based as well. He does have curriculum that you can access. You do have to pay for it. He'll usually give you a preview if you ask for one. But that is supported by the Regional Comp Center, Region 13 Comp Center, and Education Northwest as being really effective, especially for summer programs if your district has one of those. So that's backed by research as well. And then Open Middle basically takes the beginning of a task and the end of the task, so they know what they're kind of looking for answer-wise typically, but there's lots of ways to get to that answer. So the middle is a little bit more open to interpretation by the student. And all of these tasks are K-12, and the resources are on the participant guide, and we can drop those links in the chat as well. Does anyone feel comfortable dropping in the chat at least one math practice that they saw in play with the task that they worked on? While you're thinking, our group had the open middle problems in the high school task, and we talked a lot about how there was a lot of representing in some of the graphical examples, and a lot of justifying and proving and collaboration. Yep, and problem solving and persevering. Thank you, Jesse. That was correct too. We had talked about that one. Rachel says there were a lot of practices at play. Yep, Ashley's saying all of them, which is great. Oh, but maybe not culturally connect. Yeah, lots of problem solving and persevering. So again, all of those are K-12 resources that are free, which is, I love that. If you're looking for something to do next week with those kids. So we're going to move into the kind of meat and potatoes of these math practices. We've kind of looked like big picture, and now we're funneling down to understanding the specific language in them and then how we're going to use those in our classroom. So you'll see these posters. Somebody asked me if they're going to be sent to the districts. We don't have any plans to send out copies of the posters to the districts, but they can be printed. They are available online, and you can click this link, and I think Amy's probably going to drop it in the chat as well. But what you'll see are that there's 7 math practices. Each one has a heading, and thankfully we don't have to interpret what representing means. They'll tell us. So the task force has defined representing by saying that mathematically proficient students who can represent are able to recognize, use, create, interpret, and translate representations using appropriate methods and tools, and understand multiple ways of representing. and how they're interrelated. So these are all based off of the NAEP and then the research as well. And then the math practice number 1, that problem solve and persevere, was also adapted from Common Core, which you'll kind of notice some overlap there when you look at them. But these pieces down below are all of the essential things we need students to be able to do. These can be broken up. So earlier in the chat, a lot of you said that one of the first things you've started to do is look at the content standards, and you're breaking them apart and kind of analyzing what's shifted and how that might translate in your textbooks that you use and the curriculum that you teach. You can do a similar thing with these practice standards. It does look a little bit different because we are not always using content in the practice standards. We're using more processes, but the process of breaking them up is very similar. So we can still look for those cognitive demand or verbs. Typically, they're the verbs that we're looking for. And as Ashley mentioned before, in those content standards, not every verb is necessarily a cognitive demand. In the practice standards, it usually is because they're so narrow. So we're looking for cognitive demands. We're looking for processes or concepts that are play. In our practice standards, those might look like mathematical claims or a problem, sense making, for instance. And then context would be anything extra, using appropriate methods, using appropriate tools to reach a solution, kind of all the extra language that we would see present. So what is one cognitive demand we see in this math practice? You could drop that in the chat. That'd be great. There's a lot to choose from for this one. And if you're not sure where to start, look for a verb. Mary says justifying. Oh, we're looking specifically at problem solve and persevere. So yes, justifying and proving has justifying in it as the cognitive demand, but we want to look at problem solve and persevere in particular. Evaluate, engage, create. So create's not exactly in this one, but I do have it on my list of examples, and you will see it in some other math practices as well. Plan. Yep, so lots of things we're asking students to do. Angela, you listed so many there. Great job. What about, well, let's just move on. So what we'll see is you can start to kind of break these apart, and you can look at what are we asking them to make? Conjectures, right? That's the process we want them to engage in. It's the concept we're asking them to apply, making to. We might see that we have plan, right? What do we want them to plan? We want them to plan the problem-solving process, or we want them to make a plan. We want them to follow solution strategies. So you can see that these are kind of broken apart. And I'm skipping through my little questions I had at the bottom for the sake of time, but essentially through this process, you start to kind of notice there's linkages. So we have make conjectures, make a plan, follow solution strategies, evaluate progress. You might even break this up to evaluate accuracy as well, depending how you interpret this at your school. But what's important and what helps us by doing this is understanding all of the things we're asking kids to do. If we're only giving them tasks that have them make conjectures, then we're not really teaching them the full spectrum of problem solving and persevering in our classrooms. We're not giving them all those opportunities that we need to in order for them to graduate with all of these skills when they're 12th graders. So we need to be aware of what's in there so that we can hit all these components in our instruction. But these are K-12. And making conjectures, I'm sure many of you would agree, looks different for our kindergarten students than it does for our 12th grade students. So how do we figure out if a kid is ever proficient in this math practice or any of the math practices in particular? So this is more of a rhetorical question for the sake of time, but I want you to start to think about that and kind of ruminate on how do you know that a kid is they're on track, they're on target, and at some point when they graduate, they're going to be able to do this math practice, whether it's problem solve and persevere or justify and prove or whatever, to that level you expect at the finish line. I'm forgetting the name of the author. Some of you have taken lots of ed classes will know exactly who I'm talking about, but he always says, begin with the end in mind, right? So how are we beginning early on with those early learners with that end 12th grade standard in mind? And the answer is, I don't think there's any one way to do that. So I want to kind of pause again and say that there's a lot of different ways to figure out how to break these apart and what standards you're going to set for kindergarteners, first graders, second graders, all the way up to 12th, and how you're going to assess that and figure out, hey, my kids actually do know how to justify and prove, for fifth graders. They've hit that. All of that is really going to be specific to your school and your district and probably require a lot of collaboration because whatever you all agree on, kids should be held to the same kind of sliding scale as they go through their instruction. So what happens at one school might be a little bit different than the other, but what's important is that K-12 spectrum within a school or district is consistent. So here's some examples of what you might do. This is in the K-12 document. This is a very generalized, not specific to any one math practice, but it just gives you an idea. Some schools might choose to make rubrics. So this is what a rubric might look like, especially if you're using a proficiency model. You might say, okay, beginning students are going to need a lot of support. Developing students need some. They might have some ability to do some of the things on their own. Maybe my kiddo is really good at making conjectures. They can guess, but they don't know how to make a plan, right? And that's okay. They need support to make a plan. They're developing. Proficient would be they can do all these things with independence and accuracy. And mastery would be they can exceed those expectations. So they're linking math practices, they're linking content standards with math practices. They are going above and beyond what's developmentally expected. So kindergarten students able to do it at a higher level than their peers. There's lots of ways to interpret these and set them up, but maybe a school district looks at what does this scale look like for kindergarten versus first grade? Maybe we do grade bands, lots of ways to do it. Another example is like a self-assessment strategy. This is a resource that we're making but hasn't been released yet. So this is one where you'll see elementary student language on the left, secondary student language on the right. Maybe this just looks like students running through and saying, hey, I know how to try a guess. I know how to make a plan. For those secondary students, it might be, I know how to make a conjecture, right? So we've elevated the language appropriately for those older kiddos. Yet another way we might see this come to fruition is a different kind of rubric, still a self-assessment, but this one stacks everything in a way that students can see that they're progressing. So a student might self-assess and say, again, I could teach a master class on making conjectures. I can guess all day long. I don't know if my guesses are right, but I'm really good at guessing. And then I'm not so good at beginning to make a plan. I'm still learning how to do that. Maybe I'm really good at applying a plan, but I could evaluating, right? So lots of ways. Again, this is part of that guide that we're working on for teachers, but it's not been released. The emphasis on these examples are that students should understand that it's a sliding scale and they might slide back as the concepts that we teach get harder. So their ability to form a conjecture as a fifth grader might be really strong, but as the concepts get harder in seventh grade, might kind of slide back a little bit as that scale shifts. So I'm curious, how do you think if you were going to start a conversation with your colleagues in the school what are you kind of thinking about how to figure out if students have these durable skills, if they have these process abilities? How would you assess it? You're not married to any of the answers you put in, but just what's coming to mind of how you would like to see if your students are able to do any of these math practices. Angela, nice. I like that you brought in the observation piece because it doesn't always have to be a student assessment. You could definitely do teacher assessments. I didn't show any examples of that, so I'm glad you put that in there. Becky, you said something similar too, constant evaluation, math games. I'm seeing a lot of student assessments and self-evaluations. I'm glad you liked that resource. It'll be up, and I will make them for all the math practices. It's just slow going. But they will be up at some point. Yeah, Ashley, that's a good point. So it's hard to see with multi things, and with assessing this one, it's not always like it's not a test in the way we're used to giving them on the concepts, right? But we might do, like I think someone said earlier, a performance task, right? So you might see whether they can communicate effectively and do some kind of an evaluation based off of that. Sonia, yeah, exit tickets are really helpful as well. Great. Okay, so as you're having these conversations, because it sounds like from the chat, there's a lot of follow-up conversations that might happen and exploration. As you're having those, try to see if you can link some of these skills to the graduate profiles that you have at your schools. If you don't have those like off the top of your head today, you don't need them. So don't panic if you're running through the catalog like, oh, where is that thing? But I have some examples up here of how that might go. So as you can see, Kalispell has problem solver as one of their essential skills for their profile of a graduate. They say all their graduates need to be good problem solvers. That's a big part of our math practices, right? So the Kalispell teachers could make a link there and say, our math content, our math curriculum is helping our students become problem solvers, communicators, collaborators, etc. And here's how, it's through those math practice standards. Same thing, Hardin, it's hard to read. I love their graphics, so I couldn't cut any part of this out, but they have critical thinkers, perseverance, integrity, empathy, adaptability, and communication, or communicators on there. So there are ways to link it, and I think that will help. Tammy also said she loves that idea of linking. It's going to help with some conversations, especially when you might be trying things that don't clearly align with the content standards, but you can say, this is why this instruction matters. It's helping our students become lifelong learners, right? It's helping them towards that graduate profile. And then the other component I love is kind of mentioning this to students when they say, why are we doing this task? And I can say, well, because it's teaching you to communicate, which our school and our community says is essential to you as a graduate. Okay, we only have a minute or two left, so we're going to wrap this up. I am going to just leave this slide and say that these are next steps. If you're curious about where you want to take this work, we've spelled it out for you. So here are some things you could go do with it, including evaluating those mathematical practices and working with your team. Carrie, I'm glad you asked that question. So every school has one. It is required for accreditation. Whether or not you know about it is a whole other ballgame, but your administrator can probably help you with it. Many school districts have them posted on their website. Some do not, so you might need to reach out and have a quick conversation with your admin. But they all have something in their integrated strategic action plan about the graduate profile. We are going to also look ahead. So our next session that we're going to have is understanding mathematical proficiency. There are some more resources. If you did not know, the kindergarten expanded guidance document is out. It's live. You can access it. It's got lots of fun stuff in there. So kindergarten teachers want to probably check that out. And then here are some examples of what you have access to help you with this work with the math practices right now. So this is the PK12 resource. Every single math practice has the practice listed. We've written out those embedded skills so you don't have to. However, you might interpret these differently, so it's worth checking and having conversations. We also defined when you might see these skills come in play during the problem-solving process. We've described what rich tasks might have that engage that math practice, and also ways adults can support learning. Now, this bottom part, a lot of teachers already know this, but this is really helpful for families when they're trying to understand why justifying improving is so important to the math classroom. You can show them, and then you can also show them how they can help you help their students do that. And then in kindergarten, in all the grade level ones, it'll actually give an example for the grade level. Sorry, out of respect for your guys' time, I skipped some of the last couple slides, but here's the feedback form. If you would like, I'll stay on if there's any questions.